What's up, everyone? Welcome to the channel. I'm Brian with Xact IT and Cybersecurity, and we got a good one for you this week with a ton of cyber attacks and a ton of things to catch you up on. So we look at what happened in the last 7 days in the world of cybersecurity, who got hacked, what kind of things you need to be aware of out there. It's all jam-packed into today's video, so let's get right into today's content. First one up on the docket, this is just a follow-up to our U.S. Treasury hack that occurred in the last several weeks that we've heard about. And we are learning new information about who specifically at the Treasury may have been impacted by the Chinese hack. And what we have learned this week is that the top of the Treasury Department, Janet Yellen, her computers and the computers of her top 2 deputies were also accessed by these Chinese. Now, in a hack that's being dubbed as a major security incident by the US government, they are minimizing these particular computers being accessed, saying that only about 50 files of unclassified documents in nature were accessed on her computer. I kind of find that hard to believe. Like, if they have access to the computer, why would they only access 50 files? And it just doesn't seem like that's really true, or maybe they don't know, but it is kind of concerning that Chinese nationals or hackers from Chinese were able to get into our government's computer and access files without anybody being tipped off that this was going on. This type of activity is easily detectable if you have the right things in place. But when you rely on certain single pieces of software as your security and you don't have multiple layers built in, these are the types of things that can happen to your business. And our first victim this week that we learned about is the city of West Haven, Connecticut. They are assessing the impact of a cyber attack. It says that the city is investigating a cyber attack that recently forced it to temporarily shut down all of its IT systems. And an update on January 11th, Mayor Dorinda Boer said that an IT system security incident on an unspecified day has forced the shutdown. The city initially said on a Facebook post on December 26th that the government was experiencing a network disruption. And the city is still assessing what data might have been affected by the incident, the update says. So the article goes on to kind of talk about the city's preparedness around this type of stuff and other things that made them, or at least tried to make the city of 50,000 residents near New Haven and Yale feel a little bit more comfortable about the situation. I'm going to warn everybody that nobody should be feeling comfortable about this situation. When you can't even figure out the date that somebody did something to your system or impacted your system, it means exactly what I say on this channel all the time, that companies, governments, schools are completely unprepared for this stuff. They don't have the right things in place, and the hackers have a huge leg up on what's going on out there between businesses and what they can do to you and how they can do it, because you're simply not prepared. You're not investing in the right tools. You're not investing in the right strategies. You're not even listening to the right people, because if you were, you would be doing these things and not sitting on your hands and waiting for something to happen, and then you find out the result of these attacks when you're dealing with them. Pay attention to what other cities are going through. Pay attention to what other colleges and universities and other governments are going through. And learn from these mistakes and start doing the right things. If you sit there and think that this stuff isn't going to happen to you folks, I have news for you. Your city, your town, your schools that your kids go to, that you go to, the businesses that you work at, that you rely on for a paycheck, are going to deal with these problems at some point in the future. And hopefully the organization that you're associated with is prepared and they are doing something about it. But the chances of that happening today in 2025 are pretty slim to none. And as we can see here with the Winston-Salem cyber attack that happened right before the new year, Somebody wrote an editorial in a local paper saying Winston-Salem cyber attack earns a do better. And simply what Winston-Salem is learning is that when you don't provide information to your residents, that is very upsetting to them when they don't know what's going on, when their town that they pay taxes in is dealing with a cyber event and nobody is speaking. This particular editorial goes on to kind of point out that the town isn't providing any information and nobody seems to know why. The person who wrote the editorial kind of ponders about whether or not the FBI is advising them to stay quiet. I can tell you right now that's probably not the case. They can release some information. It doesn't have to be anything that jeopardizes what's going on. But to be completely just saying like we're dealing with a network event and then not providing any information almost a month after the attack at this point, this person's right. Winston-Salem, you need to do better, not only in your response to this, but in preparing for the event in the first place. When you see organizations, like I said, governments, businesses, not being able to handle these situations correctly, it means they weren't prepared. And you need to prepare, you need to practice, you need to run, cyber attack drills in your business and organizations so people understand what it looks like, what the chain of command is going to look like, what the communication is going to look like before the event actually happens. If you want to use the event as your drill, I say to you, good luck. And this is no fun, but the Tennessee-based mortgage lender this week confirms a December cyber attack. Seems like there was a lot of cyber attacks in December. I'm just going to talk about that here a little bit, folks. We don't find out about cyber attacks right away in most cases. In most cases, we only find out about cyber attacks as they're going on, usually if it's a very visible or public service that people need or large corporations where a lot of people work. When you're talking about smaller or mid-sized companies, they can kind of fly under the radar a little bit because nobody's really going to write about this. Nobody's going to really run to the internet and complain that they can't do business or they can't go to work like we see with some other cyber attacks. And sometimes it takes a little while for this stuff to come out. And when we do learn about it, channels like this bring it out to you, but it does take some time. But as you can see, just in this week alone, in this week's video that I'm putting out, a lot of cyber attacks occurred over the holiday, over the Christmas to New Year holiday. And this is another one where one of the largest mortgage lenders in the Southeast U.S., and this is a big deal, and we're just starting to hear about it, suffered a cybersecurity incident last month that exposed troves of customer information. So if you have a mortgage with the Mortgage Investors Group of Tennessee, they did not outline yet how many customers were impacted by the attack, but said they have hired a vendor to identify the affected individuals. A vendor, that's the first time I've heard cybersecurity professionals called a vendor. The company said it expects to notify these customers directly once the process is completed in several weeks, which is basically what I just said. It takes a long time for these unprepared companies to figure this stuff out. MIG posted a notice to its website explaining that the cyber attack affecting its network infrastructure began December 11th and was discovered one day later. So mid-December, heading into the holidays, end of the year, this organization got hit. It is now January 17th, over a month later, and we're just learning about it. I hope they filed the correct filings that they needed to file. It doesn't seem like they did, and they are a financially regulated organization. So the investigation revealed that an unauthorized user had gained access to MIG's computer environment. The unauthorized access resulted in the exposure of sensitive personal information pertaining to a number of individuals. The company said MIG has more than 26 branches and about 300,000 customers, securing over $30 billion in closed loans since its founding in 1989. MIG warned that those affected likely had their full names and financial information exposed, which probably explains why they delayed releasing this information, and they're going to continue to do so. Because on the heels of this are going to come class action lawsuits, among other things. They're going to have to provide credit freezes and free credit reporting for the affected individuals for a long time that they're going to have to pay for either through their insurance or out of pocket. But this is just the beginning of what this company, Mortgage Investor Groups out of Tennessee, is going to have to deal with here in the very near future. But it goes to show you folks that there's a lot of organizations getting hit with cyber attacks, small and large, that are exposing your information on a regular basis. So if you're concerned about your identity, check out the links in the description below. There's plenty of places and plenty of things that you can do. And I have resources in the description below that you can click on to easily secure your identity. So if your information becomes exposed to cyber criminals in an event like this, you're protected. And watch my other videos on this channel where I talk about what happens to individuals when cyber criminals expose your information on the dark web. You have to take this stuff into your own hands because businesses have decided that spending money on proper cybersecurity protections is really not something they're interested in doing. They'd rather be more profitable, and they'd rather spend the money on AI right now because they see that as something that can drive more profits. Leaders today don't understand that cybersecurity and doing it the correct way will lead to more business and more profitability, not only now, but in the future, as individuals like you watching this video decide, I'm not going to do business with people that don't protect my data. And this information about who protects your data and who does a good job and who doesn't a good job, that's all going to be on the forefront very soon as other companies figure out ways to present this information and get this information in front of consumers, because people are going to get sick and tired of dealing with identity fraud and identity theft and healthcare fraud and healthcare insurance theft. These things are happening every day at a rapid pace. And companies are just choosing not to do the correct thing, which is invest in this stuff. And you don't have to take my word for it. It's all over the news. You just got to find it, right? This one came out this week, published January 15th. World Economic Forum spotlights growing gap in cyber readiness, which is basically what I've been saying on this channel all year long, saying it more and more in 2025. The ransomware remains the top cyber risk concern among executives, but CISOs are almost twice as likely as CEOs to make that determination. And then, so as I've said, CEOs, they're not taking this stuff seriously because it says right here, nearly 1 in 3 CEOs said ransomware is their top risk concern. Really? Only 33%. What is your other biggest risk? What are you worried about? A recession? Some kind of geopolitical event? Well, that's going to be a hack. I'd love to know what the other things that are more important to 66% of the CEOs out there. I think that's a choice that CEOs are making, in that they don't want this to be their top concern when it should be. But CISOs, on the other hand, half of those, 50%, which is still a very low number because it should be 100%. If you're a CISO and you don't think that hacking or ransomware is your biggest threat to you, your job, and your future, you probably shouldn't have your job. So this report goes on to highlight things like ransomware groups getting really good at what they do and businesses not doing anything or not preparing adequately for these threats. And it says right here, amid increasingly independent supply chains, this cyber inquiry is resulting in systematic points of failure with significant consequences for the overall resilience of the ecosystem, the report said. So the World Economic Forum is essentially saying that this isn't going to just impact businesses. This is going to impact industries and economies at some point. It's not about just one business going down anymore. It's about one cog in the wheel that's so important to a particular industry that we see all the time with these supply chain attacks, taking down economies and industries. World Economic Forum is backing me up on everything that I say on this channel by saying more than 1 in 3 small organizations said their cyber resilience is inadequate. It's right there in black and white. A sentiment that's grown 7-fold since 2022. So 7 times the executives believe that they're not doing enough since 2022. In just 3 years, they're like, yeah, we're still not doing enough. Conversely, large organizations with more than $5.5 billion in annual revenue cite an improvement in cyber resilience, with only 7% describing insufficiencies. I'm going to say that that's a lie. That is not true. These large organizations may have improved their cyber resilience a little bit, but only 7% describing insufficiencies, meaning 93% of these super large organizations that do over $5 billion in annual revenue are doing it right, and it's everybody else that's doing it wrong. Just go look in the news and go see who's being hacked. Change Healthcare, way more than $5.5 billion. The largest cyber attacks that happened in 2024 were companies above this revenue level. And those companies might be harder to penetrate, but they're not doing it as good of a job that's being portrayed here. But we see that in our discussions with these organizations all the time, where they think just because they're big, they're doing it better than everybody else. That's the best way I can describe it. They're not doing it right, but they're doing it better than everybody else. So they kind of walk around with a false sense of security, thinking that they're doing everything they can, when they're doing more than the next guy down the street or a partner or competitor or vendor. And then this article goes on to cite and say nearly 3 in 4 cyber leaders told the World Economic Forum that small organizations can no longer adequately secure themselves against cyber risks. Yes, they can if they dedicate the right resources, but of course, all these businesses are going to be looking at this situation that we're in and saying, oh, we're heading into weaker economic times, maybe recession or depression, right? And they're going to skimp on cybersecurity in the name of that. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen all the different excuses given out by businesses as to why they can't invest in this stuff right now. There are few companies out there that do the right thing, they're investing the right way, but the majority of companies out there today are still not doing it the way that they should, and they're avoiding the conversation so they don't have to learn all the things that they have to do, because once you learn, it becomes gross negligence when you decide not to do anything. And then if a really good lawyer comes after you in a class action lawsuit and knows that you were grossly negligent in your decision making, I say to you, good luck in that class action lawsuit. And speaking of class action lawsuits, let's take a look at this one where a biotech firm settles class action lawsuit over ransomware attack for $7.5 million. A large biotech company decided to settle a class action lawsuit for $7.5 million after facing backlash for a ransomware attack that exposed the diagnostic test information and personal data of nearly $2.5 million. The company was called Enzo Biochem. They filed a report with the SEC on Wednesday, announcing a settlement to conclude a civil lawsuit from a ransomware attack that occurred in April of 2023. So it takes a little while for these things to play out, folks, but at the end of the day, these class action lawsuits are so damaging to businesses, way more than the event itself. Had this company done the right thing up front, it would have cost them way less than $7.5 million. And when they were going through their ransomware event, I'm sure they thought that the event was going to be the end of it and what they paid out until this class action lawsuit came along. We are seeing it over and over again where organizations have to deal with these class action lawsuits. They usually get settled or handled within a year or two of the event. but the numbers are striking that are coming out of these settlements. 7.5 million, 60 million we saw with a hospital whose records ended up on the dark web. This can go all kinds of different directions, and you can also be hit with multiple class action lawsuits depending on your situation. So I warn businesses all the time. You're not aware that this is going on. You're not aware that these class action lawsuits are coming after these events to destroy your business, and they will. And unfortunately, leaders of businesses either don't believe it, they don't think it's going to happen to them, but we see it happening on a regular basis, more and more every single day, where organizations are being held accountable after the fact through these class action lawsuits. One of the things hackers like to do when they attack your business and attack your network is point out like, hey, you weren't doing things exactly like you should have. And that's how we were able to get in. A lot of ransomware notes that we see when we're involved in ransomware attacks is along the lines of like, hey, we broke in, you have poor security, pay us now to help you fix this problem, and then we'll also kind of help you understand where you're not doing things right and how we got in so you can improve your security. It's an interesting play. Obviously, not many people hire the hackers that hack them to improve their network, but they're basically saying because you chose not to do security the right way, we hacked you and now you owe us money. Well, things are kind of taking a turn here with ransomware groups, and they're starting to learn the lay of the land, learn what kind of ticks business leaders off, and makes them want to pay a ransom and pay cyber criminals when most people out there and most CEOs know they shouldn't and don't really want to. But there are times when you have to make a business decision and you have to pay these guys. And they come up with all kinds of different schemes and different ways to make you feel the pressure so you pay. And here's a new one. The current state of ransomware, weaponizing disclosure rules, and more. So what these cyber criminals have done now is they have looked at the regulations that the US government has put on your businesses, and they're basically looking at those rules and saying like, hey, look, if you don't tell somebody that you were hacked within a certain time frame, let's take the SEC for example, if you don't notify the SEC within 72 hours that you've had an event, you're in a lot of trouble. And cyber criminals are taking advantage of that. So basically like, hey, we hacked you at this time, you have this time to pay us, or we're going to turn around to the SEC and tell them that you were hacked. And the thought there is that like, oh, well, we don't want to tell the SEC, so let's just pay off the hackers and hope nobody finds out. And then we can just move on and not file anything with the SEC and the hackers won't tell on us. Sometimes companies get in a situation where they're like, well, maybe we want to talk to these guys, or maybe we want to negotiate. But when you put a timeline of 3 days on you have to pay or we're going to tell the SEC, that gets ugly. So that means you have to report this to the SEC before the hackers do, which means you have to get your story in line, all your artifacts in line, everything that you're going to submit to the SEC in a shorter time frame than 72 hours, because when that 72nd hour hits, they are going to notify the SEC as soon as it happens. So that's just one example of how they're using regulations to get companies to pay. Think about all the laws and regulations that are in your business, in your industry, in your state. And if you don't know, there's links in the description where you can get help to find out what might be a regulation around cybersecurity that your business has. And if you're sitting here going, yeah, my business doesn't have any, click the link down below in the description and get some help with this, because I guarantee you that you do. And you don't want to end up in this situation where you're basically having to pay a ransom because you weren't aware of a regulation. So this week we learned of a FortiGate's a firewall, and we learned of a FortiGate vulnerability that has been running rampant. And cyber criminals have been taking advantage of here at the end of 2024 going into 2025. And then this thing pops up. Threat actors published data of 15,000 hacked FortiGate firewalls. Well, it's smart timing, I would say, on the person who did this part, because it had nothing to do with the current vulnerability that's being exploited in the wild. This is from an older zero-day exploitation from 2022. And this person published 15,000 hacked FortiGate firewalls, the data from them. It published IP addresses, configurations, and things like that. Now, it's not a super huge deal if you took care of this in the last 3 years since it's come out. But if you didn't take care of this, you could be in a lot of trouble. And we have seen many times where businesses hire somebody to set up a firewall. They set it up for them. It works. Internet works. Great. But nobody maintained it over the years. Nobody's been updating it. And, this is where these types of things happen, where businesses have something like this in place. They don't realize they have something like this in place. They didn't realize it needed to be even maintained and managed by somebody, so things like this don't happen to them. But if you have a firewall from FortiGate that is, say, maybe 3-4 years old, you might want to take a look and see and get some cybersecurity professional, some network professional to take a look at that firewall for you to make sure it's not out of date, because with this information out there, you can be hacked very easily at this point. If somebody comes along and decides to start, pinging these IP addresses and seeing what you have, and if you have this exploit or vulnerability available, you're probably going to be in a lot of trouble. You were already hacked once. That's how they got this information. You could be hacked again by a more sophisticated group once they get their hands on this and they know you're a potential target. Doesn't change for the current vulnerability either. You need to get these things updated. You need to get them taken care of. Vulnerabilities are the second most common way that cyber criminals get into companies' network, behind phishing emails that your employees click on. So taking care of this stuff is critically important today. And moving right along with this week's news, we had Patch Tuesday. We had Microsoft updating Windows as they do every month. And the big news this week is 3 zero-day attacks that are currently being exploited in the wild that were patched in this month's Patch Tuesday. And the details of this are pretty eye-opening. Microsoft released the latest Patch Tuesday roundup of security patches, and this month it's a whopper. 159 vulnerabilities were in Windows. 12 were considered critical and include no less than 8 0 days, meaning at the time that these were discovered, there was no fix. The fix only came out on Tuesday. And 3 of those 8 were already known to be under active exploitation, according to Microsoft. And this is one of those things where cybersecurity professionals and administrators take a deep sigh, take a deep breath, because now they have to analyze their network to see if there's markings or what's known as indicators of compromise that are indicative of these 0 days. So what happens here, folks, just quickly, is when a 0 day is exploited, there's certain activity, there's certain things that these guys do that are kind of thumbprints or ear markers for somebody's doing this on your network or somebody's exploiting this. And until this information comes out from Microsoft, as cyber defenders, we don't know what to look for yet. So when this stuff comes out and they post bulletins, then security operations centers and security teams can start looking for this stuff, but it might be too late. They might already be in your system at this point. And that's why we need these companies like Microsoft, companies that put out hardware and software. They need to be held to a higher standard by our government, just like your consumer electronics have to meet a certain standard for electricity to be even plugged into a wall. You have to be UL listed, meaning that when I plug this into my outlet, it's not going to burn down my house. Well, the same thing needs to happen with hardware and software, and I've been advocating that for over 5 years at this point, because we see Microsoft just putting out software that's chock full of vulnerabilities. And while this is the norm right now, we need to do better. We need to change this, and we need to hold these companies that make billions and billions of dollars, almost trillions, more accountable when they put out security holes in their software and hardware that they sell to you. And a big warning, if you're an Amazon S3 customer, AWS S3 bucket customer, and you have data in those buckets, there's a new ransomware attack and on Amazon S3 buckets that makes recovery impossible without payment. On top of it, you have 7 days to pay it or they delete your S3 bucket completely. It's a new attack. It's widespread. It's going on. It's impacting a lot of AWS customers. You need to be aware of this. You need to address it if you have AWS S3 buckets. But essentially, these cyber criminals have figured out a way to exploit your S3 bucket completely, encrypt it with very high level encryption, and the only way to get the data back is to pay the cyber criminals, because they will either keep it encrypted and delete it, and then your data is gone forever. So interesting to see where this goes, but all the security researchers and all the things that I have read have said that there is no fix for this. If you get hit by this, you need to pay. And we're going to wrap up the video today with one final article, but before I get there, please check out the links in the description below. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing to our channel. Hit that alert button if you want to be notified when we put out videos just like this one and cover major ransomware and cyber attack events. And remember to hit that like button for the video. Appreciate your support as we climb towards 7,000 subscribers. And in our last video, or our last article to discuss this week, guys, YouTube hack. Attack warning, what 2.5 billion users need to know. Now, it says YouTube hack. I'm just going to kind of cut to the chase here and say this could really happen on any social media platform. But influencers, you need to be kind of aware of what's going on here. But people who consume content from certain influencers also need to be very aware of what's going on here, because hackers have figured out a way to basically use influencers' good name, influencers' trust to exploit the people that follow them. And what happens is users, follow an influencer, follow a channel on YouTube. They get used to seeing things like links being posted by different community members. And the idea of just sharing information, sharing links, becomes very commonplace on certain social media platforms, certain YouTube channels, certain Instagram creators, things like that. And then these cyber criminals are very aware of what happens on that channel, how people speak, what people say, what they're interested in, what they're going to respond to. And then they create a message that would seem like it's a normal message for somebody to post in the group who's a member. And a lot of times what's attached to that message is a link or something linked to something very malicious, where there's you could have extensions installed that steal credentials. The idea here is they are just using the platform and the trust that the audience has with the creator to make it seem like that this person, you should be clicking on this link because this person's either part of the community, so there's a level of trust there, but a lot of times they're targeting the creator and they're trying to get the credentials of the creator. So if they can get the creator to click on one of these links and steal their username and password, then they have control of the YouTube channel or the Instagram account, and then they can kind of do whatever they want to that audience, which is really scary. But you need to be aware of these things. Like, even you might log into your favorite YouTube channel, your favorite Instagram influencer. You might be checking out their stuff. Just think twice before you click on something, because you're never going to know when they're hacked. The hacker isn't going to come there. And if somebody doesn't have control of the account anymore, it's really hard to get that information in front of users on that platform. You might be able to go to other platforms, send it through an email, an SMS message that your YouTube account's been hacked if you have multiple social media properties. But the reality of it is today that most social media influencers work out of maybe one or two platforms, unless you're really big. Most influencers use one or two platforms, so it's going to be within that platform that these exploitations are happening. Now, on the other side of this, not only can you get scammed and things like that, but if you're on your work computer, if you're at home, you could end up with ransomware by clicking on one of these links. It's no different than a phishing email. So just be advised that this is also coming your way. This is going to be another way that cyber criminals are going to continue to try to get at your employees. You have to be mindful of this stuff. You have to monitor for it, and you have to put strategies in place so things like this don't lead to things like ransomware and other devastating cyber attacks and breaches that we see happening rapidly across all businesses around the world. It's not slowing down. So please do something about this stuff, folks. It's getting really insane out there how bad it is for businesses around the world, and how much companies and how many companies are being attacked by these cyber criminals. I only talk about the stuff that's in the news. I'm fully aware of many, 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 many more cyber attacks that don't hit the news, but I don't like outing companies where it's not published already in the news and it's only maybe on the dark web or something like that. But you have to understand, you have to take my word for it, unless you're going to do your own research, that this is a massive problem that's not slowing down, and it's going to impact you individually when your credit gets stolen, something in your life that you value gets ripped off by a cyber criminal. These guys literally have enough information on the dark web to steal information right out of your bank account, or steal money right out of your bank account through some kind of fraudulent ACH transfer or direct debit. They can obviously, do things like use your credit card number online for an online purchase if they can steal credit card numbers and resell those. We're also seeing people's health insurance being used by other people. When somebody might find out through a statement or a bill that they get in the mail where they see, you were treated for something at a hospital that you've never even been to in your life. We hear about this happening more and more every single day. And not to mention things like identity theft that lead to, credit theft or title theft, where you lose your home as a result of what these cyber criminals know about you and then can conduct these transactions without you even knowing about it. And then you go to do something one day and you find out that you have a big problem. And I said it last week, I'll repeat it again. Our children under the age of 18 are going to turn 18, they're going to go purchase their first home, or they're going to go for their first credit card, and they're going to find out that some cyber criminal already used their information to open up credit cards, and they already have poor credit. And it's not easy to clean this stuff up. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and nobody's going to compensate you for that. So get your credit locked now. There's links in the description. And if you need help with any of this stuff, links in the description below. Have any comments? Love to hear you down below. See you in the next video. Stay safe out there. Take care, everyone.